Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on unceded First Nations territory, and with acknowledgement and gratitude, it's a pleasure to speak with all of you today. I was mentioning to my table that it's almost like an all-star cast of people who are here today, people who are engaged with outreach and community engagement and these topics of reconciliation. So it's an honor to be speaking with you today. I want to begin by telling a story, if you don't mind, because that's what my work really does. I work with intercultural engagement, but also storytelling and finding unique stories. And this is a picture on the screen of Vancouver, market life in the early 1900s. And you see, well, from my eyes, the South Asian soldiers who are sort of pictured on the right-hand side of the screen. And they're walking down the street. And it's these everyday stories of intercultural interaction where real change takes place. And through my work, what I try to do is sort of bring these to light and show how they reach back through time and how multiculturalism is not just a function of the 60s, but goes back to the early ages of Vancouver and the early ages of Canada. One of the ideas I was wrestling with was, I was watching The Godfather, and it begins with the line, "I believe in the idea of America." And in a sense, too, I believe in the idea of Canada. And what does that idea of Canada mean? And for me, it is these alternate stories that come out about what Canada means and how it can be defined. This is, I might press the wrong button. This is a picture from the 1907 race riots that took place in Vancouver, throughout Vancouver's Chinatown and Japantown at that time, led by the mayor of the city at the time period, but also some major business leaders at the time, and they went through Chinatown and they broke windows. I always liked this picture just because it shows the aftermath of that event, but also the communities that are there. There are these Caucasian policemen, the shop owners, and on the very far side is a South Asian gentleman in a turban. And it just showed to me how these histories, these traumas, never just happen to one group. They always happen to everyone. Like Professor Yu has mentioned, this idea that history doesn't take place in silos, that each community was always affected by the traumas that took place. And so in my work, what I try to do is focus on that and bring that out. This is a newspaper that was published in Vancouver in 1914. It's called the Hindustani, and it's published by South Asians, and it was a newspaper that advocated for freedom from British rule of India. And it was based in Vancouver and based in San Francisco. But the great thing about it was that this newspaper was published in Chinatown. And the printing press was on Main Street in Chinatown. And the editor of this paper mentions that when he first came to Vancouver, he came into Burrard Inlet and he saw the snow on Grouse Mountain and he saw the trees in Stanley Park and he fell in love with the city. And in a sense, that's a direct connection to today. We can still see those places, those physical markers. But he also mentions that Vancouver's Chinese restaurants are the best restaurants in the world because they don't discriminate who comes to eat there. And it's one of those great stories where the author, Hussein Rahim, the editor of this paper, talks about these restaurants and how great they are in terms of fermenting dialogue and creating connections to the city. And this is the area of Chinatown where that printing press was located, the Hindustani printing press. This is old Vancouver. There's some fun stuff about archives, but seeing that area of that city. I'll quickly go through, but that picture, it also shows a group of intercultural people, a group of Chinese, a group of First Nations are all in this picture in that area. Just to paint that picture and reimagine what Vancouver was like at that time period. And this image, which I really love a lot, is from the SFU Komagata Maru website, but it's an archival photograph of the first Sikh temple in North America, and it was based here in Vancouver on 2nd Avenue near Burrard Street in Vancouver. And we mentioned earlier this idea of sacred space and increasing the definitions of that term. And this was a place not just for Sikhs, but for Hindus, for Muslims, and not just a religious space, but a cultural space, a religious space, a community space, an economic space. The basement of this building was used for those meetings for freedom movements for India. And one of the great things about this is that there is a silver circle at the bottom of that picture. And when you zoom into it, it's a logo for the Yu Cho Chow photo studio, which is based in Chinatown. And Yu Cho Chow was the photographer the Sikh community or the South Asian community would go to take these photographs. And over the course of several decades, you see the Yu Cho Chow logo at the bottom of these pictures, just showing that connection between communities that always took place. And then the Komagata Maru, and that's the work I'm working on now. It's the 100th anniversary of the Komagata Maru episode, and I use the word episode instead of incident to show that it's a chapter in a longer narrative. It wasn't just a one-off incident. And this was a boat that came in 1914 carrying 376 passengers. There's a great write-up of it in the textbook, in the pamphlet, so I won't go too much into detail. But it was in Broad Inlet, and it was just right there. And going from there to here is a long journey in itself. Even though the distance is not that long, it's a long journey through time. And the injustices that come out of that story are important to remember. And that's what I'm working on now in terms of this Komagata Maru project, because I'm curating 2 museum exhibitions of the Komagata Maru, and it's about talking about the living legacies of that moment, not just a story of 1914, but a story of 2014, and how it's applicable to all Canadians. So in that sense, when you see a picture like this, and then when it's reused as a picture like this, you can see how that narrative is still so important today, and how setting aside issues of how this gentleman, or why this gentleman was doing this, the comments on the comment boards about why this was justified shows that there's still ignorance out there that needs to combat it. And education, of course, is a great tool of doing that, but how to educate is important. So in terms of wrapping up, this is the project, the Komagata Maru 100 project, 1914 to 2014. It's taking place all across much of Vancouver, showcasing the living legacies of the Komagata Maru. And even outside of our project, there are these great moments taking place. At the University of Fraser Valley this weekend, there's an opening of a Komagata Maru exhibition, which I encourage you all to see. But it just shows that this is a really important moment. We have descendants of the Komagata Maru passengers that are here today. Mr. Thuot is here. And we have great researchers. But it's a great time to engage in these discussions, to bring out these multiple viewpoints, to engage in this dialogue, and to showcase how we can redefine and keep continually redefining this idea of what Canada is. And one way to do that is bringing these stories to light and not just brush them off under an apology, but to really engage in sustained dialogue that might take decades, but helps move things from there to here. Thank you so much.